distinguishedly absent today. I won't publicly embarrass them, but neither will I today mention their names. They declined our invitation, citing a pledge they signed with their party. As a journalist, and as all of us as journalists, I'm appalled that party trumps allowing people to hear a message in an open forum such as we have today. So we're really especially appreciative to those who are here today to share their vision for Kansas if elected. So with no further ado, we'll allow each candidate 2 minutes for introductions. This will be to introduce themselves and talk about why they're running for governor. And then we'll ask for questions from the audience. And I have 3 questions already. If we get through those and we still have time, we'll get some others. So I think we'll start with the first candidate. We drew numbers and they will go in the order of the drawing. So Tyler, I believe you're first.
Do you want me to speak from here or go?
I'll speak for you.
Okay.
All
All
right,
right.
as close as you can.
Well, my name is Tyler Rusick, and I'm running for governor. Well, of course, there's an obvious difference between me and some of the candidates, whether it would be height or age. That doesn't separate me from being a legitimate candidate for governor. I may be 17 years old, but that still doesn't mean that I'm out of touch with the rest of the state. I bag in a cashier at Hy-Vee, I pay taxes, and I've been in the public school system my entire life. Therefore, being in the public school system, it's been very, very important to me to make sure that all public school students have at their disposal, as long with teachers and administrators, resources they can use to make sure that students have the best possible educational experience at any age. As well as we need to make sure that those with lower income and our seniors have greater access to state Medicaid programs. Well, there are many issues that I feel are very important. There are 3 that I want to outline to you today. The first is that we need to make sure that the youth is energized. There's a crisis of political apathy between the ages of 18 to 25. And if we don't take initiative and address it, then we're leaving them in the dark. The second is public education. Once again, the Brownback and Collier administration has created a national embarrassment for the public education system in this state. If we don't do something about it and make sure that we have adequate spending for public education, then we're going to be going nowhere. And the third is we need to meet in the middle. While there are many people going for the far left and the far right this time in the country, that just leaves more room for all of us to meet in the middle. When we work together and we create bipartisan solutions, we can move the state forward. And instead of going left or right, we can be in the politics of working together and meeting in the middle and creating the best of both worlds. Again, I'm Tyler Rusick, and I'm a Republican for the next generation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dominic Scabuza, and I am a Republican candidate for the governor of Kansas. Both my parents are small business owners. My dad owns a meat shop, and my mom owns a yogurt store. I've worked at both of those, and I've really learned how hard you have to work to make it in this state and in this country. However, over the past couple of years, I have become aware of the low voter turnout and interest in our government and our elections. So one of the greatest things I want to fix in our state is our transparency. Obviously, our state is very low in transparency. There have been multiple papers that have wrote about it, and that is my primary purpose of this election. And I believe that through working with transparency, we can create a greater understanding for younger people to get involved and have their voices heard. Like Tyler said, there's the obvious difference between the rest of us. We should not have to literally run for governor to try and have our voice heard. So I believe if we can just make a younger generation, not even just the younger, everyone easily understand with an online forum showing the bills they vote on in Topeka and what's truly happening inside those walls, it would get rid of programs that citizens could deem unnecessary, along with raising money for the big problem of education in our state. So those are definitely the 2 biggest issues I would like to tackle this election. Thank you.
My name is Ethan Randallis. I'm the only libertarian on the stage as far as I'm concerned. I'm here to make the case that a free and prosperous society is only available through individualism and having a small government. I am the grandson of a a small farming family out of Wichita, Kansas. I know what hard work is, and I've been doing farm work for years. I don't have much to say in terms of right now. I'll get into specifics during questions, but the main thing to take out is that as a libertarian, free and prosperous society means small government, less spending, more individualism, and caring about the individual rather than the collective.
Hello, I'm Carl Brewer, Democratic candidate, and I'm a former mayor of the city of Wichita, two-term mayor. Has served with the Kansas League of Municipalities as president of there and representing many of the cities here in the state of Kansas. Retired from the military, retired executive from Spirit Aerosystems, which was the former Boeing company, and also I was a representative with the machinist labor unions, representing them on state labor laws. I've had an opportunity to be able to see how decisions have been made that affect families and communities. And I made the decision that I was going to be involved. I've always said that you have two choices. You can be at the table or you can be on the menu. And in today's environment, what we have seen is that many Kansans are on the menu and not at the table and making decisions. We have to change a lot of the things, and we have to provide leadership here in the state of Kansas, create an environment where everyone has a voice, everyone is respected, and everyone has an opportunity to define what their vision is and what they would see the state of Kansas and the people in the state of Kansas as being. With that being said, I've made the decision that I was going to, rather than be on the menu, I was going to be at the table and to work, to be able to help be the voice of families as decisions are being made that are well thought out as opposed to partially put in place and then we put it off and then maybe next year or the following year we'll come back and we'll correct those things. That's inappropriate. One, we must create transparency and allow individuals to know exactly what's going on, what's happening, and how things are going to affect their families and their communities. So I'm Carl Brewer, and I'm hoping to be your next governor.
Can we back up?
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Ward. I am the Democratic leader of the Kansas House of Representatives. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I'm an attorney. I graduated from Washington Law School, and after that I went into the DA's office, where I worked for about 7 years doing about everything you can do in a DA's office, from speeding tickets to murder case. The most interesting case I was involved in, I was part of the prosecution team that used DNA evidence for the first time in Kansas. I have a small practice, a business. I know what it means to meet a payroll. I know what it means when the economy is up or down, because Wichita's economy is so tied to the aircraft industry. And when the national economy goes down, Wichita's economy goes down. I've been privileged to serve on the local city council, school board, and I've served in the legislature for the last 15 years. I believe we need to build a new Kansas economy where it works for everyone, not just the rich corporations. I think a key component of the new Kansas economy is a partnership between businesses and schools and their governor to ensure that we are promoting Kansas, growing Kansas, and creating more jobs. I think the key principle of the new Kansas economy is schools, where every child in Kansas is able to pursue their God-given talents regardless of where they live, and we provide resources to teachers to do the teaching. I believe we can do all of this in the next 4 years because we've made great progress. I was a key player in putting together the coalition that repealed a lot of the income tax experiment that was Sam Brownback. We also were able to get back the child care credit, the medical deduction credit, the mortgage deduction credit. We were able to ensure that a task force that would oversee and investigate our Department of Children and Families was included. We also had a task force that looked at our mental health institutions, which are so desperately in trouble. That's the kind of skills I'll bring as your next governor.
Thank you. I am Jim Barnett. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. This may be one of my few debates that I will be able to attend on the stage, and I'm honored to be with everyone on this stage this afternoon. I want to introduce my wife, Rosie, over here, especially because Rosie and I are newlyweds, and when people ask what we're doing on our honeymoon, I've said we're taking this extended trip around the state of Kansas. So thank you for letting us be on our honeymoon with you here today. You know, in August of 2016, I saw a change in the makeup of the legislature. A legislature where Republicans and Democrats would work together. And that's really why I started looking at this race, thinking, my gosh, maybe the state of Kansas is now ready to elect a governor who will do the same. I want to tell you that it means so much to have this opportunity to have you look me in the eye and me look you in the eye and have questions and answers. I was asked to sign an agreement that would prohibit that. It's a rigged system. The GOP debate coming up next week is rigged to protect just a few. It is not what our democracy should be about. We've been in settings in Linn County where there were multiple Republican candidates. We were looking forward to questions and answers. We love that. Frankly, that's where we do best. And when the host figured out that there were 3 candidates, there was myself, Mr. Seltzer, Mr. Hartman, Q&A disappeared. How bad is that? Because there are some tough questions that we should be asked, and you ought to have that opportunity. So, last question. Why am I running for governor? I'm a Republican. We broke it. We ought to fix it. On the other hand, Kansas wins if we have a good Republican nominee, a good independent, and a good Democrat. Then Kansas wins. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm just going to pull this off because sometimes I don't speak loudly enough to be heard, and I want to make sure you hear me. I also want to compliment my colleague, former colleague to my left, for being here. I think it takes courage to break with your party and to participate in the forum that they have banned, essentially. I also wanted to thank the Kansas Press Association, particularly Doug Anstett and Emily Bradbury, whoever she might be, for not only putting on this event, but they had a wonderful panel on transparency last night over in the hotel. And it was very well attended and received. I also would like to thank all of the journalists who are in the audience today. You know, it has been your efforts to hold public officials accountable and to ask us the tough questions that have really made a difference in Topeka this year. And is a critical part of our democracy. Now I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself and a little bit about my vision for the state. It'll be a snapshot given the time that we've got. I grew up in a military family. As a kid, I lived all over the world. So when I got older, got married, and started to have my own family, I really wanted to put down roots someplace. I really wanted a permanent, forever home. My husband Ted and I sat and thought for a long time about where that might be, and we chose Kansas. And we chose Kansas because of the opportunities that it afforded our kids, the great schools, us, the great jobs, and that sense of community that I was really looking for. So that was 32 years ago. And with the education and the opportunities that my daughters received in this state, they are really strong, vibrant, and venturesome women now. And I'm running for governor because that's what I want for all Kansas families and all Kansas kids. I want them to have the same opportunity to succeed that my daughters did. We've had 7 years of hard times. Nobody is unclear about that. The Brownback-Collier administration for 7 years put their own political ideology ahead of those things that were good for Kansas families. And we need that to change. We need to go back to some common sense. So that's what I plan to do as I get into the governor's office. We really need a champion in the governor's office, somebody who will be thinking about our families first, who will not put their interests ahead of those of our families, and that you've got me.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Robert Kleinberg. I am from Salina, Kansas, and I am a salesman by trade and also a truck driver. I work approximately 50 to 60 hours a week for Frito-Lay, and there are several things I want to tackle if I were elected governor. It's hard to narrow it down to just 3 because there are so many problems and so many facets in our state. If I were to choose 3, however, I would have to start with a higher minimum wage. Many workers are working their time away for almost nothing. We need to address this. I want to address education. We deserve, as Kansans, the best schools in the country. I firmly believe this and want to tackle the issue of funding and make sure that our schools have what they need in order to make our students succeed. I also want to be able to tackle the issue of healthcare. This is an ongoing issue. We've been fighting this fight for what seems years, and I want to do everything I can at the state level to ensure that Kansans receive the health care they need. A very common question I get is, why am I running for governor? Somebody like me with no prior political experience. It's an easy question to answer. It starts out with wanting to help people. Help as many people as you can. But then it gets deeper. I'm here because I want to give a voice to all the working class families that don't feel like they have one. I'm here because somewhere in Kansas there are people who are working 2, 3, maybe 4 jobs and barely making ends meet. I am here today because somewhere in Kansas somebody has to choose between paying a bill or putting food on their table. These are things that we need to tackle, and I want to be the governor that can lead us to where we need to be. Thank you.
Good afternoon, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Joshua Swati. I was born and raised in Ellsworth, Kansas. I now split my time between Ellsworth and Topeka. My 2 papers of life record really are here in the room, the Ellsworth Independent Reporter and the Sterling Bulletin. If you ever want to find out anything about me, you can see them afterward. I went to Sterling College. I want to thank the Kansas Press Association for having this event, and I also want to thank you. I can't say that I know how hard it is, but I can imagine how hard it is putting out either a daily or most of you a weekly paper. And I just want to say we appreciate what you do, and what happens in our communities is important. And as we consolidate industries, and particularly in journalism, and they try to take a lot of central news and just spread it out, I think that it's important that we appreciate the news that we produce around the state, because it's so important. I know that we all understand that the state's in trouble, that we all know that the state has to turn the page, and that we have to demonstrate that we are headed in a different direction. And I think all of us up here, and I'm pleased to see so many different people here, but we all have to answer a couple fundamental questions. The most prominent one being, can you win this race? And I would argue that I can win, and I do so by raising 2 points. One, I as a candidate concede no county, and as a Democrat we haven't done that in a long time. Many of you I've already met with because I've done a 105 county tour. 2, I as a candidate take part in these sorts of events. There are some conspicuous absentees today, and I think that I'm one of the few candidates that's missed not one forum that I could be a part of. If you want to have a forum in your community or in your county, invite me. To the best of my ability, I will be there. If I can't be there, I'll send my brother in Liberal, Kansas that looks just like me, and we'll see how long it can go before we realize it's not me. But my point is this: to represent and govern the state in the future, we have to have someone that represents the future, but also does so in a way that connects all the different corners of the state of Kansas. And I feel like I do that better than any other candidate. Thanks.
Hi, and I'm Jeff Ferguson, and I'm running to be the next governor of the state of Kansas. When I got into the race, a lot of people looked at my campaign with skepticism. But I believe, I got into this race for one reason and one reason only, and it is to one reason that I saw is there is a lot of political apathy in this country. I've seen a lot of people that they don't know who their congressman is, they don't know when elections are, because they feel that politics is just a game of old white rich men. They feel that there is no importance. There is no importance. They're all going to do the same thing. They're all going to absorb their corporate donors. There is no point in voting. And I'm running to show that is not the case. That there's a candidate that represents the young generation and that represents issues that matter not just to the young generation, but to everyone. One of my major issues that I have not heard tons about in the state of Kansas that I believe would not only help our economy, but help us be a more free, prosperous state, is the legalization of marijuana for, at first, medicinal use, because I believe it is a crime to put people in jail, for many years for using a drug, in some cases, when they need it to survive, to live a healthy life. And I believe that it's a crime, or even if it's not for medical use, I believe that it's a crime. People are doing something out in their own life. It's not the government's just going to say you need to go to jail just because you want to, change your consciousness a little bit. I think that's one of the main issues that I believe the Democratic Party and the Republican Party should address. Also, one of the major issues that I believe healthcare is a major issue again that my campaign is addressing. Although I'm a big supporter of the Bernie Sanders universal healthcare system, I do not believe it would be well implemented at a state level. I have looked at many compromises, and I support the compromise idea that was proposed early last year in Nevada that would essentially add a public option-like system to the Obamacare exchanges. I believe we can have lower premiums that are accessible to more people until the national government takes that responsibility. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name's Rick Cluse, and I'm running as an independent. And for those of you who don't know, I'm already on the 2018 ballot, so if we had the election today, I'd win. I've been in public service for over 30 years, and I'm currently the founder and director of a nonprofit here in Topeka. Now, the Kansas Constitution outlines the responsibilities of the governor, and I want to just touch on a couple of them. They're to communicate in writing the condition of the state, and it's more than just economical. I'm concerned with the health and the well-being of the people and how they view their government. Also, they're to ensure the laws of the land are enforced so that peace can be preserved. In British times, they were noted as the conservator of the peace. As governor, I will be an advocate of peace. I want to be an advocate of peace. I will reach across the social and the economic divide. While traveling the state in 2017, I had the opportunity to hear what Kansans had to say. And this is what I based my platform on. First, we need to ensure our teachers are well compensated, valued, and supported, and that our schools and special needs programs are adequately funded. Second, we need to network with local governments to address the safety and the drug problems in our rural and urban communities. Third, we need to correct the state budget because it's like life. If you don't correct things along the way, make the proper adjustments, it catches up to you. Fourth, I want to be bipartisan. As an independent, I can bring fresh perspective and balance. I'm not looking to force an ideology. It's going to take all of us working together for the common good. Today brings a lot of challenges culturally to us. Some politicians are saying, we need a revolution. We need to be careful what we ask for and how we're mentoring our young people, especially in a society of so many social injustices. I say we need a renaissance. Let's put Kansas back into the hands of the people so we can keep Kansas home. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joseph Cutera. I'm running as a Republican for Kansas governor, and first off, I'd just like to say I lost my voice a couple days ago, so that is why I might sound so raspy. But I'm running on the general belief that I believe that there is a lot of partisan bickering going on, and this is happening at both the state and federal level. I heard someone say just a few minutes ago that a few years ago, Republicans and Democrats, they could get along. We could work together. We could work on a compromise. And today, you can't even stand looking at each other. What I've noticed is you want to go from 90% of people liking you to 50% of people hating you, go into politics. And that's unfortunately, that's the scenario we're in. And I believe that that's absolutely, it's really a shame. And the fact that we've been pushed to these corners and we keep getting pushed to these corners is really, it's unfortunate. And one of the bigger questions I get asked is, why did I decide to run? Well, it may seem like a novelty that a team is running, and with all of us on here, it may seem like a novelty, but I genuinely believe that no matter what your age is, no matter how tall you are, I believe that politicians, whether you're a local politician, a state politician, or a federal politician, these are the people that can bring real change to a state, city, or country. And I believe I can be one of those people because the people we're seeing elected today all over the country just aren't getting done what I believe that the younger generation and the older generation are seeking after, and they're only seeking out for re-election, and it's a whole broken system. I believe I'm a staunch believer in school choice. I believe that a free market and vouchers and public education is a good way to drive up education levels and really raise the state standard. I'm a staunch believer in gun rights. I believe that my father and I go down to the gun range every other weekend, and it's a big bonding experience for us. And, I believe that the tax cuts that Governor Brownback did were very poorly implemented, and I think we need to take another good hard look at that and make our tax cuts more equitable to the person and without sacrificing essential government programs like education. Thank you.
Okay, the second round here, we're going to start with the second person. Go that way. You don't have to answer the question, but if you don't, just pass on to the next person. First question is going to come from Adam Strunk. He's a journalist at Newton Now, and if we can get a mic over to, he's got one. Okay, go ahead.
All right, it's for all the candidates. What specific action would you take as governor to have the largest positive impact on the state of Kansas?
Did you hear the question?
Yes.
Okay.
As a young person, growing up in Kansas has been a great novelty. And I see much potential and a very high potential vibrancy in our future. We have the aerospace industry in the south, an economic engine in the east, and a strong agriculture industry in the west. If we can find a way to unite Kansas and have everyone work together to make this state greater, that is something that is a great goal for us to accomplish.
My first step in building the new Kansas economy will be to hire a Department of Corrections secretary who promotes Kansas. For the last 4 or 5 years, we had one secretary who used it as a piggy bank for himself. It's reduced the number of people out there aggressively seeking new employment businesses to come here. So the first job would be hiring a Secretary of Commerce who has my vision of building the Kansas. On the second thing I would do is reinstitute the ban or prohibition for discrimination against people of same-sex relationships that was repealed by St. Bernard. We need all the creative people possible in Kansas to work and build the new Kansas. And that's the two first things I would do to make that new economy.
The first thing I would do, because I believe that if you're economically free, you're going to be free, you're going to be happy, is I'd seek a repeal of the income and corporate tax at the state level. I know it sounds radical when you get down to it. The state has no right to your money. Your money is your property. That's been rolling court cases over and over and over again, dating back to the 1800s. Again, it sounds radical. A lot of people point to the Brownback cuts as examples of this, but Brownback didn't cut spending. He only cut revenue. You can't do that. That's why we had the deficit issues. Just like we see at the national level, we're having issues with spending right now as a state. The only way to do that is have someone that's physically conservative enough to tell the truth about the issues.
Okay. In my particular case, I would create an environment where individuals become more transparent. When we start looking at our overall dollars and our tax dollars, they belong to the citizens. They belong to your families. They belong to your communities. And you have the authority to be able to know exactly how your money is being spent and where we're investing your money as far as government is concerned. That is nowhere out there. And no one's taken the time to explain it to you as to how your money is actually being spent or what you're actually being taxed for. We need to create additional, more transparency. I'm a firm believer that you can never have enough transparency, but even taking it a step further, we as policymakers owe you, the people that we work for, an opportunity to be able to talk with you and to find out what you would like to have inside your communities and inside your homes. What type of quality of life would you like to have? We're supposed to be a tool for you to be able to use as opposed to dictating to you what your quality of life is going to be.
Thank you. I want to correct a misstatement earlier. I said we need a good Republican, Independent, and Democrat. That should also include a good Libertarian. So Ethan, my apologies about that. And I'm honored to be here with all the young people. The most important thing to answer your question directly, when I'm governor, is to present a budget that balances and has revenues that will pay for adequate and equitable funding in education, and that will recreate a functional state government. We have decimated so much in this state, taking money from KDOT, Medicaid, the keys were given and thrown out of state, DCF, Department of Corrections, the list goes on. So the next governor has to recreate a functioning state government. Now we have a functional legislature now. We need a functional governor to do that, and the budget has to be balanced. And I think that Kansans, or at least I hope enough Kansans, are looking for a governor, will be honest enough to say that we can't do all that because the veto override of the tax bill still doesn't balance. We're still taking money from KDOT, still not paying capers, no new money for schools. To say we can do all of that without adjusting revenues is dishonest. Somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Thank you.
I think there are two things that I would do. One, I would try to attract the best and the brightest to come into the cabinet to serve in the positions that are so vital to our state agencies. I think it would completely transform the culture that has developed in Topeka at this point, where the issue is not how do we best serve the people, the issue is how do we shrink government the greatest. The second thing I would do is I believe very much in the adage that it takes money to make money. One of the very foolish things that we have done in the past 7 years, the Brownback-Collier administration, is that we have dismantled some of the greatest economic tools this state had. I think we can look over at our Department of Transportation and our 10-year highway plan. Not only does that create good, solid, safe roads, it also creates a tremendous number of jobs. It was anticipated that that 10-year plan would create 175,000 jobs. Clearly, because we haven't funded it, it has not done that. The other thing that we did is we dismantled the Kansas Bioscience Authority. Kansas Bioscience Authority came into existence in 2004. Before that, Kansas was not on the biotechnology radar across the nation. Within just a matter of a few years, we were number 5 in investments in biotechnology. We were attracting startups and other kinds of firms here. We were growing that industry. That was becoming our next biggest industry. So that is something else. We need to reconfigure things like that that will help us really grow our economy and broaden the base of support. And then clearly public education is also an economic driver. You know, they are the ones who create the workforce of the future. And when you look at what businesses want when they either try to grow or to establish themselves in an environment, it is a high quality workforce. So we need to make the investments, not because the court's telling us to do it, but we need to do it because it's in the best interest of the state. And I would throw higher education in there too, that we did do some smart things early on in this administration, where we invested some money in our career and technical education, but we've pulled all of that back. We need to reinvest that and more so that we can work with our businesses in the state of Kansas to create the workforce that they need to be able to grow and thrive.
I have a couple things that I think would have a significant impact on the state of Kansas. First and foremost, a more progressive tax structure being implemented. The addition of multiple tax brackets with the elimination of regressive taxes that disproportionately affect the lower classes. If we can implement something like that, we can very easily balance our budget and begin paying back the money we've taken from different funds across the state. The second thing is something that's more future orientated, but it's the immediate reintroduction of civics into our educational courses or schools, facilities. And this is important because there's a massive disconnect between the general population and the government. This problem is only multiplied by government secrecy, but at a core level, a lot of times as I go around the state, I tell people I'm running for governor. And one of the more common questions I hear is, of what? This is a little bit concerning. Another thing I hear very frequently is I don't care about politics. It doesn't affect me. I disagree with that very wholeheartedly. And I can explain to you why it does affect you on a daily level. These are two things I think that would definitely create a significant positive impact in the state if they were implemented. Thank you.
So I appreciate the fact that the Democrats have been having forums. I feel bad for the Republicans because this is a valuable exercise to have. But we were down in Pittsburgh a few weeks ago and had a similar question, and I raised two issues. I'm going to help flesh out one that was used already as well. We have to demonstrate to ourselves and to the rest of the country that we have turned the page. And so I suggested in Pittsburgh that we reinstate civil protections for LGBT state employees because it sends an immediate message on day one that the state that fought to be a free state is back. The state that gave us Brown versus Board of Education is back. The state that gave women the right to vote long before the rest of the country is back. And it's an immediate day one action. The other thing that I would do that's probably a little different than the rest of us, because we all have to address the instability in state government. We all have to address the financial mess. But I would also find a dedicated revenue source for our natural resources. And you could say that's broadly within the water plan, but I would expand the water plan a bit because I think it's a message to Kansans that we value our natural resources, because for the most part, our economy is still built on those natural resources. And when we have a water plan fund, but it's chronically underfunded or not funded at all, we are telling ourselves that we don't really care about it that much at all. And when we think about economic development, it can't simply be for the next 4 years. It has to be in a 50-year timeline. And so I appreciate the fact that we've talked about it, but if you don't fund it in that sort of timeline, then you don't really commit the state to it. And we must make sure that there are economic opportunities 50 or 100 years from now. That's an obligation of a governor, in as much as it also is the obligation of the governor to make sure that the state is stable right now. We must commit ourselves. And I know there's no money right now, and it doesn't seem like the right time, but there's never a right time to invest in other areas that aren't typically high-profile parts of the state. But I think this one, specifically to your question, what could have a huge impact, is a real opportunity to begin to reintroduce Kansans to one of the most important elements that they have around them, their extraordinary natural resources.
The most important thing the next governor of the state of Kansas has to do is to give the power back to the working people. There are two of my policies that I believe are very important. One is increasing the minimum wage. This not only will help minimum wage workers help pay their rent and keep food on the table, it will also help give more money to the economy, as when people have more money to spend, they spend more. So it not only helps the people get by, it also helps the economy grow in the state of Kansas, which I believe that's why I believe raising the minimum wage is a vital plan and must be done as one of the first actions of the next governor. Also, I believe we must eliminate the sales tax on food. This again goes back to making sure the people, the lower classes especially, have the burden taken off them. If we can replace the funds once we get rid of the sales tax on food, we can replace it with a luxury goods tax, so those at the top that can afford to pay extra pay it, so the people at the bottom who cannot do not have to pay so.
When I think of Kansas and our state, and it being successful on top, everything that's successful on top has to start on the bottom. When I look at our state, 105 counties, I have to look at the fact that those counties consist of the communities and the local governments and the mayors. And so to be successful at state level, we talk about truth and transparency, we got to be connecting as a governor. I want to connect with the mayors of the local communities. And I want them to know that they can see truth and transparency through my administration. I want to be able to reach out to them and hear and listen to what their needs are. Because when we start reaching out to the local rural communities and all the counties in our state and hear what they need to see done in their local communities, everything starts at the bottom. And then the success of them thriving and their counties being successful will shine forth as a state, and we'll see something different in Kansas.
So generally what I believe I would do, first thing I would do if I were to be elected governor is something that would affect Kansas for years to come. I would make it fully and openly transparent. I know other candidates have addressed this problem, but just to give you an example, I was looking yesterday for the bill that the Kansas legislature was introducing to try and keep teens off the ballot. And whatever you think of that bill is your prerogative. But what I found really interesting is I had to spend nearly 45 minutes looking for it, and even then I couldn't find it. The only way I really got to learn about the bill was looking for it on Twitter. And I think that's really disappointing. It reeks of this deep state. They don't want people to know what's going on. And the government isn't something that should be completely separate from the citizen. It should be an extension. It should be a part of your arm. You should be able to know what's going on at all times. And then the second part that I'd like to address is, I think we need to take a serious look at the financial situation. I think that Governor Brownback had the right intentions with what he was doing. I think that the idea of job creation through lowering taxes, that trickle-down system, I believe in it. I think that it was very poorly implemented, and we kind of went out on a whim saying, well, you know what, it should work, and if it doesn't, we're going to put at risk a lot of very essential programs like education, like we've all addressed. So those would be my two main policy points.
So there are a few points that I would take. First of all is calling what Secretary Kobach's actions have been as Secretary of State, working legislature to end his voter suppression measures. These come in the name of voter ID laws, but we need to call it by what it is, and that is voter suppression, really working to make sure that those of lower income in the Wichita and Wyandotte County areas, aren't able to vote. There's nothing really preventing us from making sure that the integrity of our elections are protected, but we can do that in a way where we do not suppress voters. Additionally, I think that what it all boils down to is reforming the tax system. I'm a Republican, but I believe in fiscal responsibility, not fiscal recklessness. If we have a small increase in the corporate income tax rate and make sole proprietors, LLCs, S corps, for example, exempt from that tax rate, make bigger corporations pay just a little bit more, then we can spend more money on public education programs. We spend about 48% of our state's general fund on public education, but still, the way that we treat our students and how we fund education still remains a national embarrassment. We're just not raising enough money. With that money, we can put that towards soil moisture sensors and overall starting to transition to a drip irrigation system to make sure that the Ogallala Aquifer is conserved for a long time so that the billions of dollars in water and agriculture industry does not leave the state. In addition, I want to make sure that we push for an independent judiciary. It's one of the duties of the governor of the state of Kansas to take part in the state Supreme Court nomination process. And as a result, we need to make sure that we have an independent judiciary and that our state Supreme Court is not upholding a specific ideal, but rather is upholding the Constitution objectively as it is. And as well, we need to make sure that CanCare is protected. We've gone to many of the privatization measures and means of way where it's very hard to get just the appropriate care like it was under Sebelius. We need to make sure that overall we have resources at disposal in any form of government so that we can use that to better work for the state and all people of Kansas. Thank you.
One thing I discovered just real quickly, when you have 10, 12 people, you get a lot of good ideas. And that's what we're trying to promote, is the exchange of ideas. And the best ideas are put together, they're put to the test, and then we come up with the best one, and that's where we go. The next question is from Ron Keithover. Ron is over here. And by the way, I'd like you to limit your responses this time to one particular idea and keep it quick because we're about running out of time.
Thank you very much, Doug. My name is Ron Keithover. I'm president of the Kansas Sunshine Coalition for Open Government. And, the coalition comes from the standpoint that people fear and mistrust the unknown. And that the strongest antiseptic for that is sunshine and open government. I would ask each of the candidates to tell me as precisely as you can what you would do to promote transparency in Kansas government.
I would continue what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Did you know that we televise the House proceedings every day? We just limit that television to the lobby. 10 years ago, I suggested to the speaker that we send it out to the statewide through Cox Cable so they put it on their public affairs portion of their screen. The speaker at the time laughed and said no, even though Cox Cable said they would give us the equipment if they could broadcast it on there. I introduced a bill. Remember a couple of years ago when the governor did his budget on private cell phones? I introduced a bill that became law that prevented you from using private cell phones to do public business. Last year, before the Star Story started, I introduced legislation that changed the rules that would prohibit anonymous bills. If you have an idea, you put your name on it. If you go to a committee, you put your name on it. I introduced a bill that would prevent lobbying, that would require, if you work in state government in the executive branch or the legislature, and you want to go to work for a lobbyist, you got to lay out for a year, a cooling off period. That's getting you here and has some traction. I'm going to support Senator Hensley and Senator Wegel's bill that says if you're lobbying is more than just coming in the building and trying to convince me. If you're a consultant, like the governor's chief of staff was for the privatization of Lansing Prison, you got to report that also. I think those are good ideas. What we have to do is make sure transparency is not just, well, that's the issue of the day. No, that's a commitment we make day in and day out, and the governor has a heck of a bully pulpit to make sure that happens.
I tend to agree with Representative Ward. I agree with everything he said. I think he's completely honest. I think as a libertarian, the key to having a limited government, or one of the keys, is to be able to hold your representatives and your senators to the fire, making sure they're being honest and they're keeping up with their duties and what they should be doing. So I don't think I really have anything to add. I very much like what he said.
I've always been a firm believer in transparency. When I was on the city council in Wichita, I was the vice mayor. And there were a lot of decisions that were being made and individuals casting votes just by a show of hands. And what we did is came back and I pushed and was able to get it passed, where we televised how individuals are actually voting, not only televised, but then secondly, individuals had to physically vote, which left a track record allowing individuals to be able to know that day and in the future how it was. But not only after it was televised, it continued to be televised in all meetings that were actually going on, that were happening within the city. So if individuals could not be there, they could see what was going on. You can't have enough transparency in allowing your bosses, your employers, the public, in knowing what's going on and what's happening. And certainly when they want additional information, we need to provide them with that information and do it in a timely manner and do it in a respectful manner. So transparency is extremely important, and you can't have enough transparency in being able to work with the public and work with the media and providing them with the necessary needs that they have.
Thank you for the question. I want to respect the moderator's request for one answer, so it's quit shredding documents.
That's good, Jim. There's been a lot of focus on legislative transparency. What I've seen the last 7 years, the concern that I've had has been with transparency on the executive branch side. We have had so many contracts, so many things privatized, and it's all the deals have been cut behind closed doors. That needs to stop. We have committed your money, taxpayer money, for 20 to 25 years in deals that may not be in the best interest of Kansans. We just approved a lease purchase agreement for a new prison in Lansing. It's $362 million. That was all done behind closed doors. The legislature was fed false information, and decisions were made based on that. We're seeing the same thing going on down at Osawatomie State Hospital now. There's a contract going on to privatize that facility, which would really give the state control. And that's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're talking about turning over to a private corporation that has a history of severe violations and actual criminal acts. So I am most concerned that that's where our real problems are, and that's what we need to do to make things work better for Kansas and to be better stewards of rural money.
The legislature has made a lot of progress on this issue. I don't have a whole lot to add, but if there's one thing I could add is it is opening the doors, so to speak, of the executive branch, making sure that each department is held accountable to requests for information and making sure the information is available in a streamlined process for those seeking it. And also making sure that representatives, senators, and so forth, everybody who works in the state government is able to answer questions when they're given and not just brushed off to the side. Thank you.
You know, when I served as Secretary of Agriculture, our office building was leased office space, unlike some of the other state agencies. And I can tell you, it was a nightmare compared to state-owned buildings. And so I agree with Senator Kelly. Long-term contracts, whether it's for office buildings or contractual arrangements with the state, are important. And there's been a lot that's happened behind those closed doors in the last 7 years. That's why I think it's a time for us to have a frank conversation about a state auditor. And I know that the state went through that conversation prior to me being born in the 1970s. But I think it's healthy for us to have that conversation again. We have legislative post-audit. It does a fine job, but it is ultimately governed by the legislature. And I think that there is a legitimate conversation that needs to be had as to whether or not we have an independent state auditor. And then finally, in my last few seconds, I have to throw a little love down the table. Tyler, you are doing an awesome job. I've got to say, you don't sound terribly like a Republican. I respect your right to be one, but if the Republican Party lets you get up on the debate stage with the rest of the candidates, I will be there, because that will be awesome to watch. This has been fun to be with young people in energy.
I believe one of the major issues of transparency is the connection between the people and the government. And that's why I believe I have a plan for transparency that when the legislature is not in session, I will travel across the state to talk with voters and see what they think. What do they think of what my administration, what the legislature is doing? What do they think we can do better? So they feel a connection with me and with me as the governor and their local officials, so we can work on what people in each area of the state feel like, because I believe that's the best way to fix transparency, is to get down there with the people, and I believe without that, you really can't fix much of anything on that issue.
When it comes to truth and transparency, it starts with me. And this is something that I've already been on the trail from the beginning of my campaign. Josh was just mentioning the need for independent auditors. And that's something I've been saying on my campaign from day one. My son is actually a tax auditor out of Overland Park. And I said, we need some external auditors that will do the internal audits that are necessary so we can keep truth and transparency for us. As I mentioned in my last comment, reaching out, our campaigns reached out to our local mayors, communities, and they need to see the transparency in me first. It's not just if I should become governor, all of a sudden I'm going to get transparent. My whole life has been about truth and transparency. And so I launched a broadcast, my wife and I, entitled Keep Kansas Home, because I want to get my name out there, but not just get my name out there. I want people to know who I am and who my wife is for the past 32 years, who my boys are, and that we can really keep Kansas home for those that love Kansas like myself. Thank you.
I completely agree with the idea of having a televised legislature, something like a more local C-SPAN. I think that's brilliant. What I also believe in is we should establish a separate website other than the Kansas Legislature's website that puts the bills out there. When you scan the bills, you put them out there. It offers a summary. The bill that is introduced, depending on who introduces that bill, will write a summary of the bill, and then someone from the opposing party would write the opposition summary of that bill. So you can use those two opinions to kind of to weigh what you think. I also believe that in terms of what we should have on that same website, we should have the Congress the congressmen and the senators to give a synopsis about who they are and what they voted for. So I just believe that putting things online and keeping up with the times, because everything's on our phone now, keeping up with the times, putting things on websites, televising is a really good way to open up the doors for the press to get in there and see what's going on. And for citizens who are interested and who care about their state, which I hope everybody in here cares about Kansas, to get in there and form their own opinions.
I'll kind of look into just one idea. Government isn't going to be doing the best job when it has to keep itself accountable. I believe that it'd be the duty of the governor and the state legislature to come together and maybe not a state auditor, but to create an independent organization that is responsible for putting out the ideas, those being debated, and what is going on in government to the general public. And I believe it should be independent of the state government. And I think that's what I would do and encourage the state legislature to do, no matter who is in charge.
Obviously, transparency is one of the biggest parts of my campaign. There have been many great ideas. However, since I've started this campaign, the biggest thing I've been pushing is I came across a bill from a representative from Oakland Park about the website that said, they post the forms online, and citizens can go in and say what they think in like a comment section, voice their opinions, and we can see their votes. That gets rid of the anonymous voting. That is a big problem. Yes, this is just an advancement that our state needs to take with the advancement of technology that our society is seeing.
I'm getting the hook from my assistant director. But I'm going to do something. You have to follow this instruction. We have one more question from Olaf Franson, and Olaf, just go ahead and give it. And you've got 30 seconds. I'm going to time you. 30 seconds.
I'm Olaf Franson, I'm publisher of the Salina Journal, and I am president of the Kansas Press Association. Very quickly, finding a formula for education funding is like that bad penny that never goes away. What would you specifically do that would resolve the constitutional issue of equitable education funding?
30 seconds.
I think something I would do is immediately stop pumping money into it. That's not going to work. Open up school choice. University of Arkansas did a meta-analysis on this. The school choice had a statistically significant better results in test scores and student happiness.
Evaluate exactly where we're at as far as educational needs, but then secondly, also recognize that if we're going to grow our economy here in the state of Kansas, one thing that when they look at growing, they look to see whether or not we have a skilled workforce. And do we have a skilled workforce? To have a skilled workforce, you must have an educated workforce. So we can't cut the funding on education, and we need to find a way to make sure that we fully fund education and make sure that these children that we're sending out into society have all the tools that they need to be able to succeed.
2 steps. First, adequately funded, so money. Number 2, in 2014, the state legislature codified what are called ROSE capacities, now standards, that are not measurable and not pertinent to this century. The governor signed the bill that gave the case away. It's clear that the court ruled properly doing their constitutional duty. We need new standards that are pertinent to this century, what our children need in the 21st century for education, and I'll convene the people to make that choice. Thank you.
We have had a formula that passed constitutional muster. Our problem was really that we didn't fund the formula adequately, and that's what got us dragged back into court. So I think we need to make sure that the formula that we have modified somewhat, that looks a whole lot like the old one, is in place, and then we need to find the funding to adequately fund that over time. I don't think the court's going to let us off the hook this time and cut the strings. I think the court's going to continue observing what we're doing and making sure that we fulfill our pledge, unlike what we did with Montoya.
The first thing, I think the easiest way is we definitely need more school funding, but at the same time, we do need to examine the methodologies in which we're administering education. There are countries and around the world that spend less and achieve better results. Needless to say, I truly think the implementation of a more progressive tax system that gears the funding towards people that can afford to pay it with the proper investments and methodologies, I think that's how we fix school finance. Thank you.
We have to appropriately fund the formula. we have to, on top of that, reinstate due process and begin to create a pipeline so that teachers and young people want to enter that profession as a career, so that we're not only appropriately funding the formula that is largely constitutional, but we are changing the nature and the culture around education again so that it's respected at the state level. But I am very proud of public education in Kansas, and nothing against all of the other teenagers, but I have to say I'm really proud. I think the strongest teenager out here is the only one from a public high school. We still produce extraordinary kids in the state in our public education system.
I think one of the most interesting ways that my campaign has thought about this is I've looked at what other states across this nation are doing. And I believe, going back to this issue, I believe if we were to legalize marijuana for recreational purposes, we could use the sin tax revenue from that to fund education. It's been done in Colorado, it's been done in Washington, it's being done now in California. I believe it would not only give people a choice to decide what they want to do, but also help fund our children's education to make sure that children are.
Funding education is imperative, should have never got to the Supreme Court. We just got to get more intentional, and I will work in a bipartisan manner with both sides and whosoever, whatever it takes. It's like my kids, I can never invest enough in them.
Yeah, so although I do go to a Catholic high school in Kansas City, I've been blessed to go there and to be able to practice my belief, but I do agree with the fact that if you want to have a successful high school, you do need to fund it. And I believe that in addition to funding, you need to take away some of the government bureaucracy. You should give the school administrators more power, more leeway in determining who they can hire. Take a significant look at teachers' unions and encourage school choice and drive up competitiveness.
What it comes down to is perspective. I'm the only person here that has been in the public education system and as a student during the Brownback and Collier disaster. I know what it's like to go to a public school, a Title I school, where we don't have the resources to meet students' needs. Whether it be a tax increase, budget reallocation, we need resources. And having the means of financing through that, and having those resources, that's how we fix this public education in the state of Kansas.
Like Tyler said, Tyler attends a Title I school district. I grew up in the Blue Valley School District, which is obviously one of the more wealthy. And growing up, I can see that there's some disparity between the different districts. You know, Blue Valley just built a $30 million complex that no one even goes to school in. It's called Hilltop Campus. I think when you look at this, there's some inadequacy in the way we're funding our school districts, and we need to make sure every single student in the state is funded properly.
Both of my children are the products of public school. I'm very proud of them. They're very talented and they've got a good education. I can tell you what we don't need to do is spend a bunch of money on out-of-state experts to tell Kansans how to fix their schools. We know how to do it. We know how to fund the formula. We know how to do it. And we have to keep these two principles in mind. Every child should be allowed to pursue their God-given talents regardless of where they live or how rich the property is. And we need to give teachers the tools they need to educate those children. And that's what will happen in the Ward administration.
Did we get everybody? Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. And I want to thank the members of the community who came today. Thank you for joining us and being a part of this. Thanks to the newspaper people who asked the questions. I'm sorry we limited it to them because we had such a small amount of time. The candidates may wish to stay around and answer questions. Are we going to be in here paneling for our next, or others for breakouts? They can stay in here and ask questions if they'd like. Okay, let's get to our next breakout. Thank you.